bisexuality has a fraught history on screen.
For decades in film and TV, it's come to represent instability, a fear of the unknowable, the uncontained, and the consumptive. Nowhere is this more clear than in bisexuality's most common on-screen associate, the psychopath. From Frank Underwood to Raul Silva, the psychopath is often portrayed as having a fluctuating sexual appetite. And unlike his queer-coded counterpart, this villain's versatile sexuality is explicit. In narrative cinema, sexual fluidity translates to moral fluidity. The bisexual psychopath is shameless in his actions and has little regard for the moral constraints of society. They approach everyone in their orbit, whether it's victim or lover, with reckless disinterest. They use people as tools for their own perverse game and discard them when they get what they want.
A great man once said that everything in life is about sex. Except sex. Sex is about power.
This loaded framing is a result of long outdated perceptions of bisexuality as fence-sitting, or as Carrie Bradshaw so ignorantly put it,
I'm not even sure bisexuality exists. I think it's just a layover on the way to Gay Town.
Layover on the way to Gay Town. Layover on the way to Gay Town. Layover on the way to Gay Town. Layover on the way to Gay Town.
For female characters, the bisexual psychopath often manifests in the form of the femme fatale. While the femme fatale has been a stock figure for centuries in storytelling, her on-screen form emerged as early as the inception of cinema itself. Characters played by silent film actresses like Theda Bara and Alice Hollister were deemed mysterious, hypnotically seductive, and, at times, deadly. This evolved into the classical noir era, where male protagonists were confronted by elusive, beautiful women who lure them into dangerous traps. Think sirens of the 20th century. The femme fatale is an embodiment of the dangers of feminine sexuality and the power it holds over men. Joris Karl Huysmans encapsulates it best in his description of the biblical character, Salome. No longer was she merely the dancing girl who extorts a cry of lust and concupiscence from an old man by the lascivious contortions of her body, who breaks the will, masters the mind of a king by the spectacle of her quivering bosoms, heavy belly, and tossing thighs. She was now revealed, in a sense, as the symbolic incarnation of world-old vice, the goddess of immortal hysteria, the curse of beauty supreme above all other beauties by the cataleptic spasm that stirs her flesh and steels her muscles. A monstrous beast of the apocalypse, indifferent, irresponsible, insensible, poisoning. While the femme fatale's sexual prowess was repressed under the 30-year reign of the Motion Picture Production Code, neo-noir films of the post-code era were able to display her sexuality overtly.
And this is right about when the femme fatale became bisexual.
Katherine Trammell of Paul Verhoeven's 1992 film Basic Instinct was one of the most notorious femme fatales to bring bisexuality under the harsh lights and gender dynamics of the noir. Trammell, played by Sharon Stone, is a beautiful, murderous, best-selling author who enjoys killing her victims with an ice pick during intercourse. On top of being a novelist and murderer, Katherine Trammell is also bisexual, introducing her girlfriend Roxy a third of the way into the movie. As Delphine Letort notes, Katherine Trammell manipulates both men and women, and her bisexuality becomes a sign of her duplicitous and murderous character. Trammell's sexual orientation is framed almost always through the lens of the male protagonist, Nick Curran. We watch them embrace from a distance, with over-the-shoulder shots of Curran gazing at them with a mixture of erotic desire and confusion, as Trammell smiles invitingly at him. Even the morality of the film's wholesome Madonna character, Beth, comes into question when it's revealed that she has a sexual history with women, which apparently makes her a prime suspect in Curran's murder case since he can no longer trust who she really is. For Letort, the erotic thriller has introduced the lesbian or bisexual femme fatale as a new figure of the killer, thereby pathologizing a sexual orientation through the representation of the monstrous woman. Her alluring, fluid sexuality is a device used to mystify the male protagonist and confuse our understanding of her allegiances. Then came Bound. Written and directed by the Wachowski sisters, who rose to fame with their sci-fi hit The Matrix, Bound is a 1996 neo-noir which follows the growing relationship between a lesbian protagonist, Corky, played by Gina Gershon,
I like nice tits. I always have. How about you?
and Violet, the mysterious woman who lives next door, played by Jennifer Tilly. At first glance, Violet is the prototypical femme fatale. She performs her seductive femininity in the presence of the men around her, using soft power to keep them under her control. Even her appearance is an homage to the 1930s vamp, and it's this very hypnotic sexual prowess that entrances Corky. Katherine Farrimond, author of The Contemporary Femme Fatale, Gender, Genre, and American Cinema, finds Violet to be another negative iteration of the Katherine Tramiel archetype. She too argues that the bisexually active femme fatale refuses to stay still in order that the other characters in the film, and the film's audiences, can attempt to identify her sexual orientation and the direction of her loyalties. With regard to Violet, she says, "For both Corky, the lesbian protagonist, and Caesar, Violet's mafia husband, the question of Violet's sexual orientation is crucial to their ability to trust her."
But I don't know if I agree, because I think there are major narrative and directorial differences between Basic Instinct and Bound.
The thing is, we never see Violet having sex with a man. Actually, the only sex scene we get in Bound is between the two women, which was choreographed by sex educator Susie Bright. Instead of lingering on Violet's sexual parts, the camera seems preoccupied with the hand as a sexual organ.
Even the typical symbols of eroticism are displaced in this movie.
Bound has all the trappings of a male crime movie, but its gaze is decidedly feminine. Violet is mysterious, seductive, and morally ambiguous, yes, but there's no confusion about her sexuality for the viewer, since it's disclosed early on.
This is the part where you tell me what matters is on the inside. And inside of you, there's a little dyke just like me.
No, she's nothing like you. She's a whole lot smarter than you are.
Is that what her daddy tells her?
I know what I am. I don't have to have it tattooed on my shoulder.
She's also a woman trapped under the hold of a patriarchal system, the mob. Unlike Katherine Tramiel, sleeping with men isn't a game for Violet. It's work. It's a mode of survival. Like Corky, Violet is a woman who is constantly underestimated by the people around her. She wields her feminine sexuality not to exert overt power, but to slip under the radar. Violet isn't the traditional femme fatale any more than Corky is a traditional male protagonist. It's this distortion of a traditionally masculine narrative which makes Bound a successful transgression of its genre.
And this is where we finally get to Killing Eve.
In a 2019 article for BuzzFeed, Hannah Harris Green says of Killing Eve's beloved femme fatale, "Villanelle is bisexual, and for all the nuance we see around femininity and desire, Villanelle's bisexuality is portrayed in a way that is both tired and damaging. Her need for sex with multiple genders is tied to her depraved and insatiable appetite, which she is only able to feed because of her total lack of a moral compass."
Let's unpack that.
Killing Eve is a cat-and-mouse thriller, in the vein of movies like Heat or The Departed.
The basic scaffolding of this genre looks like this.
A disillusioned detective investigates a skilled criminal. Both figures work for opposing factions, a government body, and a crime syndicate, but each is more alike than it appears. Killing Eve works within this structure. Eve, played by Sandra Oh, is an MI6 operative investigating an elusive and highly skilled female assassin, Villanelle, played by Jodie Comer. The show is based off of the Villanelle novels by Luke Jennings, and it was adapted for TV by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who gained widespread attention and acclaim for her 2016 show Fleabag. And it's Waller-Bridge's apt touch that gives Killing Eve its genre-bending title. This is a violent, sexually charged cat-and-mouse spy thriller.
But it's also, dare I say, funny?
While Killing Eve has been praised for its subversiveness, Hannah Harris Green is not alone in her criticism of the show. Firstly, Killing Eve has been accused of queerbaiting, as many find that the show's promise of a queer romance between Eve and Villanelle has yet to be explicitly officiated. And this concern only grew stronger when Sandra Oh stated in an interview with the Gay Times, "You guys are tricky because you want to make it into something, but it just isn't." Secondly, Harris Green's comment falls into the category of criticism which finds that Killing Eve perpetuates the harmful stereotype of the bisexual psychopath, insinuating a distinct similarity between Villanelle and other bisexual villains like Katherine Tramiel.
But I think Killing Eve's depiction of sexuality deserves a closer look for two reasons.
1. The cat and mouse genre, when it features two protagonists who perform a similar gender, has an inherently queer subtext. And 2, like Bound, Killing Eve subverts the traditionally masculine elements of its genre by rendering its characters through the feminine gaze.
If it's one thing, the cat and mouse genre is pretty gay.
The entire concept of two people who work for organizations that may look different but are more similar than it appears is actually an interesting analogy for queer relationships. Think of Bound. Corky is a mask-presenting lesbian who casts doubt on Violet's femme appearance. Their entire relationship grows out of the tension within that misunderstanding, and it becomes official not when they have sex, but when it's revealed that the two women are tied by an intrinsic bond.
What's the word? Bound.
In their marginalized positions.
I should have seen this coming the minute I met you. Everybody knows your kind can't be trusted.
In the way they're underestimated.
If I were you, I'd have shot me the minute I brought the money back to the apartment. But you didn't. And I'll tell you why. You don't want to shoot me, right? Do you? I know you don't.
Caesar, you don't know shit.
So how is this dynamic integral to the cat and mouse narrative?
I don't know about you, but I think it's time we take a quick look at Heat.
Released in 1995, Heat is a neo-noir crime film by Michael Mann, which centers on a seasoned criminal, played by Robert De Niro, and a disaffected LAPD detective, played by Al Pacino, as they engage in a hyper-masculine pas de deux. Both men are dedicated to their jobs to the point of alienating themselves from the people around them, and share a mutual, perhaps unrealized, admiration for one another that's born out of their alienation. Charles Bramesco puts it beautifully. It's an unwritten rule that the more forbidden an attraction, the hotter the furtive flirtation. And these men know full well they can never be. They are tentative about opening up to one another, waiting to confide in the other that they don't feel much for the women in their lives. Heat, conversely, tragically, beautifully, trains a camera on two men who cannot bring themselves to let it just happen. Exhausted by the chase, De Niro and Pacino finally meet, and we get this amazing scene.
I got a wife. We're passing each other on the downslope of a marriage, my third. Because I spend all my time chasing guys like you around the block. That's my life.
Guy told me one time, don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner. Now, if you're on me and you gotta move when I move, how do you expect to keep a marriage?
So then if you spot me coming around that corner, you're just gonna walk out on this woman? Not say goodbye?
That's the discipline. Yeah, it is what it is. It's that or we both better go do something else, pal.
I don't know how to do anything else.
Neither do I.
I don't much want to either.
Neither do I.
This conversation about likeness comes up again and again in these types of narratives.
What is it about her?
We are the same.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You know what the difference is between you and me, Violet?
No.
Me neither.
Yet this doesn't seem to be something that comes up a lot in a narrative with protagonists of opposite genders.
There's never a true understanding between Katherine Tramiel and Nick Curran. For him, she's the other. But the protagonists of Heat and Bound are drawn to each other through a process of mutual understanding, of this shared experience of alienation and disillusionment. But unlike cat and mouse thrillers like Heat, Killing Eve takes this queer subtext and turns it into text. As Kathleen J. Waits notes, Villanelle, ironically, functions as Eve's doppelganger. The homoerotic dance between them aside, in Villanelle, Eve meets her alter ego, as signified in the recurring mirror tropes sprinkled through the show's first season. Eve is unapologetically drawn to Villanelle, and Villanelle goes so far as to refer to Eve as her girlfriend.
Sometimes when you love someone, you will do crazy things.
The two haven't consummated this relationship, but Waller-Bridge and her successors ruminate on how power and control play out within queer romances in a non-sexual manner.
So the lack of consummation or even officiating of Eve and Villanelle's relationship doesn't necessarily mean the show is using the promise of queer plotlines to lure in viewers, Riverdale style.
Rather, it means that Killing Eve is taking the complexities surrounding queer relationships, the good and the bad, and actively interrogating them within the familiar structures and tropes of a spy thriller. If Eve and Villanelle got together in the first season, when accusations of queerbaiting were already being waged,
would we even have a show?
When it comes to morality, Villanelle does share many traits with Katherine Trammell. She has a love for excess, she enjoys the game of killing, and even their flamboyant methods of killing are similar. But when it comes to sexuality, she seems to have more in common with Violet. Her sexual orientation is never ambiguous, and it's never used as a device to mystify any male characters. It's just there. She even transcends Violet in our typical understanding of the femme fatale. Her childlike nature makes her anything but mysterious. Unpredictable, yes, but mysterious? I don't know.
My dad is going to kill you in the face!
No, I'm going to kill your dad in the face.
No! Why?
Because he is an arsehole.
Her bodily seduction isn't overpowering. Eve is transfixed by Villanelle before she even knows what she looks like. She performs her gender not for the pleasure of men, but for herself, flouncing around in bright pink Molly Goddard tent dresses and printed Dries Van Noten suits.
So I think we can all agree that Villanelle is a femme fatale. She's also bisexual. But is she really a psychopath?
The genius of Phoebe Waller-Bridge's writing is that no one in the series fits the mold of an archetypal character, which brings me to my second point.
Remember when Blue is the Warmest Color came out in 2013 and we all thought it was super subversive, and then very quickly realized that the actresses were really uncomfortable filming those 20-minute long hairless sex scenes under the purview of a very pushy male director, and then jump to 7 years later and we get our next lesbian art house film with Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and something about it just seemed right? Yeah, that's what this section's about.
Killing Eve is filtered through the feminine gaze. Coined the female gaze by Jill Soloway, this idea builds upon Laura Mulvey's conception of the male gaze, which is understood to simultaneously objectify female characters, pleasure male spectators, and alienate female spectators. But for Soloway, the female gaze isn't a one-for-one reversal of the male gaze, where writers simply place women into traditionally male roles and call it a day.
Because then we get girl boss narratives that have all the neckbeards screaming that the females are stealing all their favorite things. And we wouldn't want that, would we?
No, for Soloway, the female gaze is more complicated than that. She states,
So this first female gaze might be something that you watch where you say, I can tell a woman directed this because I feel held by something that is invested in my feeling, in my body, that my emotions are being prioritized over the actions.
And this is exactly what's happening with Killing Eve. This show isn't just taking the archetypes of a noir spy thriller and placing women in them. If that was the case, Eve would be a smooth, brooding, self-assured type.
Shaken, not stirred.
And Villanelle, as the femme fatale, would be objectified. But this isn't the case. Eve isn't hard-boiled, she's passionate and messy, and although she explores the darker recesses of her personality, Eve is deeply humane. Because we're conditioned by the norms of masculine narratives, we expect her to descend into cold-blooded madness. When she commits her first murder, we expect her to get a thrill out of it. But instead, she's disgusted. Likewise, Killing Eve complicates our understanding of the psychopathic villain. Villanelle isn't unfeeling. In her dark psyche, there are glimpses of humanity and a desire for normalcy.
What do you want? Honestly, don't be a dick.
Normal stuff. Nice life. Cool flat. Fun job. Someone to watch movies with.
We also expect her to be unflinching, but she's also messy. When she's around children, we see her for who she truly is, a lost, lonely person who's fundamentally frightened of herself. Both characters are distinctly women in the world they live in. Both have a proclivity for feminine sensibilities, aesthetic taste, glamour, chicness. Both women are pawns in their field of work, yet despite being disillusioned at times, neither is disaffected. For example, they both have fulfilling relationships with their colleagues. As Waite states, Killing Eve explores a cultural space for female identity that straddles the line between either/or. The show demonstrates that Eve's desire for knowledge is actually the source of her power, and that her identity, far from being derived from Adam, is a refracted one most clearly viewed through the lens of another woman, rather than the other woman. So, although Killing Eve looks like a Bond film, lots of beautiful locations, chases through winding streets, and dodgy characters circling in and out of the protagonist's orbit,
I think we can agree it's doing something a bit different.
Bond films are action and intrigue-driven, but Killing Eve is about interiority.
I am concerned with the creation of a formal imagery that is specifically female. A language that fuses mind and body into erotic objects that are nameable and at the same time quite abstract. The content is always related to my own body and my feelings, reflecting pleasure as well as pain, the ambiguity and complexity of emotions. Human gestures, multi-layered metaphysical symbols below the gut level translated into an art close to laughter.
Nothing about Eve and Villanelle's relationship can be explained through words, or even depicted through an act of embrace. Through the dynamics of cat and mouse, the bizarreness of their interactions speaks a fundamental truth. Remember Sofia Coppola, whose command over the feminine gaze evokes a visceral understanding in the female viewer, allowing her to feel seen without any dialogue at all? It's the same with Phoebe Waller-Bridge's writing of Killing Eve. The power, attraction, and desire between these two women transcends language and even action. It's inexplicable.
And for that, it's decidedly feminine. Concerns about the depiction of sexuality in Killing Eve are understandable.
Hollywood is notorious for exploiting and pathologizing LGBTQ identities, a problem which persists in film and television to this day. So people are right to be wary when a show depicts these identities through a historically problematic genre, where bisexuality is a symptom of immorality, where lesbian relationships are objectified for the male gaze, and where masculinity is venerated and glamorized. But it's important to keep in mind that Killing Eve has some very skilled women at its helm. Phoebe Waller-Bridge was never going to give us a show which checks off boxes for representation and leaves it at that. The purpose of the feminine gaze is to elevate our media beyond typical understandings of character and plot. Villanelle's sexuality isn't up for question. Eve's morality isn't fixed. Their relationship is fluid, it's both tender and dark. At the end of the day, Villanelle and Eve see each other, and by extension allow us to feel seen in their complexities.
And isn't that what we want from our shows? Nuance, style, balance?
The more we ask Killing Eve to explicate its intentions, the more we yank it from its very special place in media, transcending genre, transcending archetypes, and transcending words altogether.
Except for season 3.
Special thank you to Fotis Papadopoulos, Louis Osta, Syed Hassan, Malpertui, Izzy, DW, Cooper Stimson, and Nina E. for supporting this channel.